We love all of our great partners across the OutKick network. 2 new ones today in the Four Rivers region and Paducah, Kentucky there. We say hello. Plus the southeast region of Missouri, Fox Sports Radio in Cape Girardeau. Glad to be a part of your daily commute. And we hope to make the afternoon go by faster for you with OutKick 360.
Pretty cool on Twitter.
Welcome.
Coach Wallace, who is the assistant coach at Paducah Tillman High School, big school there in
Coach.
Paducah, says, excited to have you guys on at Paducah. Been listening since the early days of the old show.
Nice.
And coaching high school football now in Paducah.
Terrific.
So we say hello to you on 95.9 FM up in Paducah.
If you are tuned in across the network, let us know. At OutKick 360 on Twitter and Instagram is where you can find us. Terrible news with John Metchie, former Crimson Tide wide receiver, who is now at the Houston Texans and diagnosed with leukemia.
Second round pick, 44th overall.
Yeah, and a fantastic guy. This is a player who worked his way back off injury and demanded to play in some big games for Alabama, only to get hurt again, I believe. And for him to work again to get healthy.
ACL.
Yeah, and to have the combine that he did and to get ready for the NFL draft despite the injuries, remarkable. The silver lining in this is the fact that he is in a city that is known for outstanding health care. So
MD Anderson Cancer Center is
Yes.
the best maybe in the world,
So,
right there in his backyard.
and he also, with the type of leukemia he has, he does expect to have a full recovery and expects to be back in the league, albeit based on his statement, he says it's not going to be this year. And so just we send our thoughts to Metchie and his entire crew that's around him, but also we say, man, this is bad luck totally for not just him, but the Texans and everyone involved. You know, that's the side note to the story itself.
Really unfortunate feel for the guy who's fought back from a lot of stuff, and now he's got the bigger fight ahead of him, but he's in a great spot, as you said. And, you know, for all the dumb things the Texans have done to shoot themselves in the foot, here's one that's, you know, completely out of their control and just bad luck. So good thoughts for John Metchie and in this instance for the Texans, who didn't do anything wrong on this one.
And Leukemia and Lymphoma Society has done a lot of work and research behind the scenes to help advance the research and the methods to go about curing this disease. And fortunately for Metchie, with the APL, he has the most curable form of leukemia right now.
Good to know.
So, again, we hope everything goes well for John Metchie down in Houston. Our thanks to Kennedy Chandler, point guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, for joining us in the first hour. If you missed that, you can find it wherever you download your audio. Just search out OutKick 360 for the daily podcast as well as the YouTube channel. Coming up in an hour, Riddle from the WWE preparing for Summerslam, which is right here in our backyard of Nashville, Tennessee, taking place at Nissan Stadium this Saturday night. Knocking on wood right now for the weather to cooperate because it's going to be raining all week long. And I'm hopeful that comes and goes without issue because this is like a next level type of event that we could potentially see here more often, especially once the dome gets underway, gets built. But we're years down the road from that. This is the first event of its size and magnitude from a global standpoint that will be right here in Nashville. Looking forward to it. Riddle joins us at 4 o'clock Central. OutKick 360 across the OutKick network from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Coming up, we'll get into some SEC headlines from last week. We'll discuss it and review what we learned from our conversations across the different programs, but also what was said at the podiums by these coaches. And on Friday, we learned the NCAA finally handed down its notice of allegations for the University of Tennessee, and more importantly, Jeremy Pruitt, where names were named and money is on paper and pointing at different sources, not just Pruitt, but also his wife.
Mrs. Pruitt involved, one of those names that were named.
Helping pay for rent, among other things, upwards of $15,000 on that, and are just around $60,000 total. Which points back to Pruitt and others within the program. So the biggest, I think, point of emphasis from it is what the NCAA says about Tennessee. While they are being, slapped on the hand a bit based on the wording and phrasing of things, it's not as though they failed to oversee everything that was going on. That it's made clear they didn't rise to that level or threshold of punishment based on the way the NCAA phrased the wording of the response.
And I'm glad we're bringing this up now because this news hit last week when I was out, and I had a lot of thoughts when I was reading through the notice of allegations.
51 pages of it. From
the NCAA, and I'm thinking, the big takeaway for Tennessee is no lack of institutional control. A failure to monitor charge to the head coach and his staff, no lack of institutional control. Now, when Tennessee made this play, when they did this, they decided we're going to fire the coaches, we are going to hold a press conference, we're going to clutch our pearls over the violations that were committed. I'm thinking this is a dangerous gambit by Tennessee because they are admitting to some really bad things in a press conference in hopes that being forthcoming will save their future with the NCAA. And I was skeptical of this plan. I've seen LSU and Arizona and Kansas and others with this basketball scandal that have basically put the middle finger up to the NCAA and said, come and get us. We're going to keep our coaches that win, and we're not going to share anything with you. And I've got to say, Tennessee was right and I was wrong because they dodged a bullet. I think that they're going to get the punishment that they've already self-imposed, which was a couple of recruiting weekends this past year where they could not bring in recruits. They've already had scholarship reductions. They're probably going to get some more of that, but nothing crippling. I would be shocked if they get any sort of bowl ban. I think this is largely over with now from a Tennessee perspective. Now, on the Jeremy Pruitt side of things, he's screwed. He's going to get a 10-year show cause. I don't think he's ever going to coach in college football again. As crazy as that sounds when everyone says the NCAA has no power, when the school that employed you decides to go state's witness, ask Bruce Pearl when Tennessee decided to fire him over the barbecue. Tennessee could have helped protect him. They fired him. It made a 5-year show cause very easy for the NCAA because Tennessee fired him. I think the same is going to happen with Jeremy Pruitt. I think Tennessee probably played this the right way just by saying, here's all of our information. Here you go, NCAA. We're inviting you to campus. We're going to investigate with you. Here's what we found. Turn it over. And then you get these statements from the NCAA saying, Tennessee is now the standard of how you handle an NCAA investigation. I read that, Paul, and I immediately think, that means they're not going to get hit with anything more than a slap on the wrist.
I think they handled it perfectly well after the fact. I think they've done a remarkable job getting off the hook, not with the NCAA, but like reputationally for what they did that got them on the hook in the first place. Philip Fulmer is a beloved figure in University of Tennessee lore, as he should be. But he did a crappy job when he came in to save the last disaster and created what could have been another disaster. Wasn't a football fix. Jeremy Pruitt was an awful hire. Jeremy Pruitt was awful. I know they got on a little bit of a winning streak there that looked like it had some promise, but the guy didn't know what he was doing. It was a bad hire.
By the way, a guy that he interviewed, one of the three, is Mel Tucker, who's one of the highest paid coaches in football now at Michigan State.
Yeah. Kevin Steele was the other one.
Which, looking now, would have been an easier decision to make if you could go back in hindsight and hire someone different.
He chose poorly. He didn't make the university look good in front of the microphone. He didn't do much to restore anything for anything. And now he's got something. How many years has he been out? He's been out 2 years, and there's still a story coming back that doesn't make them look good. I mean, unless you're in it to the level that we're in it, saying this is the way you do things when you botch things with the NCAA. But wouldn't it have been better if they had gotten to the point if they had made the right hire like they've made now with Heupel, they'd be 2 years ahead of where they are. And that's what you would have rather had happen, and they botched it.
He botched the hire, there's no doubt. And I don't think he would argue that with anyone. I disagree that he made the school look bad behind the microphone. I think he was fine.
Pruitt?
No, I'm talking about
I'm talking about Pruitt.
Pruitt, yes.
Pruitt looked like a dope.
Sometimes the way things appear, the way things are.
Yeah.
Jeremy Pruitt appeared to be a rube.
Yeah, and he was.
Yeah. I mean, him and his wife were giving direct payments to players.
Yeah, I said last week, Chad, if you're going to violate well beyond $60,000.
Well,
I mean,
also,
that's a pittance.
look, I was on Dan Dockich's Sirius XM show Saturday morning from up in Nebraska.
He never stops working, by the way.
Yeah, he's always got a show. But he was asking me about it, and he almost came to, he's like, it's interesting what you're saying, because I've always had this hardline stance on cheating is cheating is cheating, and I was not a guy who ever cheated in Indiana because I played and coached for Bob Knight, who was thoroughly against it. But he said, I see this report, and I'm thinking, am I really going to be morally outraged because his wife helped out the parent of a player with $1,200 in a payment for an apartment, or that Jeremy Pruitt personally paid for medical bills for a mother who didn't have the money? Like, is that really, when you're looking at $60,000, and oh, by the way, there's an incoming Tennessee quarterback allegedly making $2 million a year to play football there?
Times have
Are we
changed.
going to be outraged by $60,000? What outrages me about it is the level of stupidity and how brazen Niedermeyer, Pruitt, Mrs. Pruitt, Shelton Felton, an assistant coach, they were brazenly dumb about how they went about this. And this cuts to the heart of a big problem. And I wish that Philip Fulmer could have seen through this with Jeremy Pruitt, and he didn't, and he made a bad hire, and he's no longer the AD for that reason also. Going back to Lane Kiffin, Tennessee has hired, the 2 times they got in trouble with the NCAA is because they hired someone with zero respect for Tennessee as a program. I'll say it. Lane Kiffin came in there with a lot of swagger, a young guy. He had no knowledge of the history of the program.
Wanted to turn it into
he
USC.
had no idea they were a top 10 all-time winning program, did not care. He came in with the attitude that you have to cheat your ass off to win at Tennessee. Jeremy Pruitt got accustomed to just beating the living you-know-what out of Tennessee at Alabama or Georgia or anywhere that he was, right? He takes that job thinking, boy, to get good quick, I better just start handing over cash to people and making sure that we're cheating to staying ahead of it. When you hire people that have no real respect for the history of that program, it's not, and again, I'm not going and saying Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee, the only program to ever pay recruits. Jeremy Pruitt did not learn this at Tennessee. His wife, he met her at Florida State working for Jimbo Fisher, who just stood behind a podium and went after Nick Saban, said, oh, we would never do anything like that. They don't learn this just when they get to Tennessee. But the problem I have with it is it speaks to a blatant disrespect for the program and the school where you are. And I think this goes back to Lane Kiffin. I think Jeremy Pruitt is guilty of it also. I think Jeremy Pruitt's a good defensive coach. I don't think Jeremy Pruitt's got any future in college football coaching after this notice of allegations. None.
Well, the cash amounts may be a bit off in what we were thinking, but it was Dan Patrick who put out the McDonald's bags of cash. That was what was being discussed like a year and a half ago. And McDonald's is mentioned in the 51-page document. Bags of cash, I mean, it depends on how much cash is a lot to you, but the reports are in the actual record from the NCAA around $225.
Yeah, and they say it's an erroneous report. The NCAA says there was an erroneous report by Dan Patrick about bags of cash at McDonald's. Said that the confusion was they delivered McDonald's to a family for dinner at night. The breakfast was Chick-fil-A, which is hilarious in an NCAA report, and there were no bags of cash. That report is false, that they were not receiving that. Most of the money, if you read through it, is hotel payments. It's travel expenses paid to families and to recruits for illegal recruiting weekends during COVID. They couldn't pay for anything during that, and they paid for, in one case, there were 6 recruits that came in. Tennessee didn't land any of them. It was an entire weekend with 6 big-time recruits. They all went elsewhere. Tennessee paid for the hotel and everything else. That's a majority of the cash. Now, there were payments of cash made to current players to entertain recruits, over $1,000 paid to some of them to take recruits out that were in for the weekend. But a majority of this is illegal payments made to bring people in for dinner, travel expenses, things like that.
Hit us up with your thoughts at OutKick 360 is where you can find us on social media. Coming up, we will get into the SEC news and we'll recap last week's big headlines from Atlanta. And we'll go through some of our interviews and chats and our big takeaways across the conference as practices get set to begin across the Southeastern Conference. News and notes next on OutKick 360.
We are back, OutKick 360, live across the OutKick network, live in our 6th and Peabody studios, downtown Nashville, with Old Smoky Moonshine and Yeehaw Beer. We're ready to talk some SEC, boys. I was bummed to be out last week and see all the fun you guys were having with all the SEC guests live from
awesome.
Atlanta.
It was loaded.
Shout out to our crew that went down. Davey Hudson got it done for us, boots on the ground there in Atlanta. Coming back into the studio, guys, I'm wearing the Old Smoky polo, and I went to the restroom, and I'm coming out, and this nice older gentleman stopped me and asked my opinion on a lot of products here at the venue because he thought I was
a salesperson.
Yeah, and I was like, sir, we just host a show that's back here on the left. He's like,
I
yes.
would have gone.
But then he goes, but my son is he's a craftsman. And he knows his beer, and I'm trying to make a selection to take back to him. And I'm like, you need to go with this. I just started listing. Yeah.
I would have done that. I would have walked him around. I would have come in 5 minutes late for the segment and come in with the whole story.
Aftertaste with this one, but I think you're really going to like those.
Do
you want something a little more hoppy?
I've been admiring this sweatshirt for days. I bought one for my son and my wife for Christmas. I love the floral design and the elements. Field day. Can we talk quickly about this Kyler Murray thing? Because I think it's a big deal. Ian Rappaport just sent this out. I know we're heading towards SEC conversation, but there is an addendum in the contract that Kyler Murray must weekly do 4 hours of independent study. There is no finance attached to this. And Rappaport makes it like the team thought it was important, so Kyler Murray thinks it's important. I think this is a babysitting clause that indicates to me the Cardinals don't think that Kyler Murray will do enough work on his own, so they had to put it in the contract. And it says, like, I guess they can monitor it in some way, shape, or form, but it says, like, for the avoidance of doubt, players shall not receive any credit for independent study with respect to any time periods, blah, 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 if the player is not personally studying or watching the material while it's being displayed on an iPad, if he's watching television, playing video games, or browsing the internet while such material is being displayed. So they're like, he's got to be watching and studying the iPad and can't be dilly-dallying on other stuff.
Well, they can keep up with it now because whenever they distributed these iPads during COVID, that's how they tracked whether or not these guys were actually, during the time that they weren't on the field and they could not be in the room, they were bused to different locations or whatever. That's how they kept up with your screen time. And then they would boast about players' screen time.
Consider it akin to when you take your HR test on domestic issues in the workplace or something like that.
It's a great example.
You can't just let it run and at the end, on good faith, pass the test.
I think it's really smart of the Cardinals. I'd like to see if this is in anyone else's contract.
We've not heard about it being in
anybody else's
contract.
We haven't heard about it, but maybe agents or someone comes out and says that's not that uncommon. Nowadays for new contracts that are signed.
My quarterback, Chad, is doing this without a contract element to it.
We can say that this shows that they are skeptical. They just gave the guy the second richest contract for a quarterback. I don't think they're that skeptical of him with what they gave him in this contract. So I read it as, yes, Paul, I think there's something to that maybe he needs to spend a little more time working on the plays for the upcoming week. And the game plan, I also read it as it's fancy legal maneuvering and language to try to get out of a bonus, or if there's some sort of contractual issue, you can try to get out of it with this, saying you've breached the contract if they have proof of it because they can monitor what he's doing on the tablet. I don't know. I think it's a pretty smart way to go about it if you're the Cardinals, the team end of it.
It makes me more worried about Kyler Murray and what they've seen from him through his first 3 years.
Yeah, and I mean, the whole aura around Murray and the Cardinals towards the end of last year was just off, right? He's removing stuff from the social media, but then, he was the talk of right before the new league year started, what was going to happen there at that position.
He didn't react well to that
was
loss.
Going to be back.
That playoff loss, that spurred a lot of it because he felt like he took the blame. Yeah,
and it wasn't on him. And I've talked to a couple different coaches about that whenever they were watching the Rams and the Cardinals, and that they said that was malpractice by Kingsbury and the coaching staff on how they set up that offense and what they were doing based on the score.
Right? He's got how he handles it privately and how he handles it publicly, and what you want from your quarterback.
But that was, how he handles it privately and publicly is coming off of about a month's stretch where they were losing their way into the postseason,
Absolutely.
and there was talk about whether or not they were going to trade the guy this offseason. So he's reacting to all that and how he was set up to get the crap beat out of him in that game. And he was hit even though he was getting rid of the football and turning the football over at times. Point being, the whole thing has been off, but then he shows up to all of the voluntary work and then, of course, the mandatory work for 2 or 3 days. And we haven't heard much of the conversation since. Then they extend him. And this is supposed to be a time when, there's a bit of a celebration and a pat on the back in many ways, in many regards to today's NFL. When you consider that they take him number 1 overall, this is the self-appointed quarterback that Kingsbury wanted. Steve Keim, a year after drafting Josh Rosen, switches gears. It's a risky move. Switches gears and drafts Kyler Murray, the guy who at the time we weren't sure if he was going to be fully committed because he was also talking baseball quite a bit. He could have gone the baseball route. He's been drafted not once but twice, I believe, by Major League Baseball. Very good player.
Have you seen those numbers?
Well,
They've
no.
been out lately. The Oakland A's payroll and his annual average salary are the same.
Exactly the same.
Wow.
Well, but you
Or
consider
he might be making a little bit more than
Poor
the A's.
A's.
where they were and now where they are in expectations, and you give your guy who you drafted number 1 overall at quarterback the big extension. This is normally a time where it's really hard to find any negatives behind it. And unfortunately, you look through it and you think, man, one of the two are not surviving, Kingsbury and Murray. And now you've got the money attached to Murray. Kingsbury's got to win now. That's how I view it. Steve Keim the same way.
That's a huge year for them, and they usually start hot and
They've got
finish
Hopkins
bad.
out.
And now Hopkins out at the beginning is going to hurt them. Very interesting team in a very interesting division. I don't like this clause, though.
Couple of news and notes from the SEC and takeaways, observations from last week. Alabama and Georgia, they bring the star power, right? You've got Bryce Young and Will Anderson. Will Anderson, going back and reading transcripts and watching him on Radio Row, that guy is he's cut from a different cloth. That guy is, he's an NFL player, ready through and through, leader. When you think about franchise guys on defense, you can just tell in his mannerisms and how he projects himself that he's going to be awesome at the next level. He can stay healthy. Bryce Young, defending Heisman winner, chance to go down in the history books at Alabama with a national championship. There's pressure there despite the success that he's had. He's got to win a title to be considered among the best. And athletically, he's the best that Saban's coached. There's no question about that. But best overall, Bama fans aren't putting him in that regard yet. He's got to go win a championship. So there's certainly headlines there. Headlines, of course, with Georgia, with Stetson Bennett coming back as the championship-winning quarterback. No one's picking him in the Heisman race. No one's picking him in the top 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks in his own conference. But the way he handled things and the way that Georgia was on Radio Row, it's about what you expect. How they're never going to be hunted. We're going to do the hunting. That's the message from Kirby Smart, and I like the tone that he took there. But guys, the other big takeaway is outside of those two teams, I thought Tennessee handled things the way I would have expected some other programs to do, from Hendon Hooker to Cedric Tillman and Trey Flowers. I thought from a players who expect to win and are ready for the type of expectation placed against them, I thought Tennessee handled things the right way, and the way that I think you want a team with heavy expectations to address certain issues on the eve of camp opening. Other than that, I thought it was a very outside of Mike Leach saying some things about trick plays and how it's difficult to come up with trick plays anymore based on the way the offenses are built, and some of the things from Sam Pittman on Treylon Burks, who's not there right now. I thought Tennessee came away with the most newsworthy type of moments outside of the two teams that we expect to play for the SEC championship.
Well, they certainly acted UT like, like the expectations were nothing to them, and they fully
embraced it
expect
in a will. Yeah.
to be, right in the mix there, the top of the next level. certainly nobody's bowing down. I mean, some of the lower teams, obviously, but nobody goes in there and bows down to Alabama and Georgia and says,
right.
oh, well, it's over. We know who the SEC championship game is or anything like that. But Tennessee was getting a lot of respect from a lot of people, even though they finished behind Kentucky in the poll. I'm not putting that much in the poll since some doofus is voting for Vanderbilt to win not just the East, but the whole thing. So
outside of that one vote, though, I thought it was a fairly accurate representation of where we all sit on who's finishing 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Because there's a big mix and match of who could go where.
But I thought Tennessee carried itself like a team that belongs in the mix there, and I expect them to be that.
Well, I mean, in the mix, if you mean in the mix for second place in the East, I think they're in the mix. They're not
and that
anywhere
could pull
near
a big
the
upset.
realm of Alabama or
could
Georgia.
Pull
or
a
the
big
top
upset
ones.
that would surprise people.
Did Clark Lee mean to say best program in the nation?
Yeah.
Or did he mean
we
to
had
say
a lot of conversation about
best
this.
program in
like,
the SEC?
You can
I
go
guess
ahead
if you're the best
and,
program in the SEC, then you're the best program in the nation.
We said, Chad, you can go out and lay out that 30,000-foot long-term view, but you can't do it without speaking about the fact that you've got to do something to get your team to win one game.
Yeah,
in the SEC at the same time, a ground level view, and he just refuses to talk on that level.
I didn't like that from Clark Lee, and I've liked almost everything that he said, and it's that reason, because we praise Tennessee and Danny White for actually laying out, here are the number of games we want to win in every sport. Here's the amount of SEC championships we want from each coach. Here's a national championship we want in 10 years. These are the parameters for success for our coaches. And Clark Lee throws out a very vague, we all know that we're going to be the best program in America. Well, then asked about the SEC losing streak. Oh, we don't talk about that. We're not focused on winning an SEC game. And I'm thinking,
better.
It's okay to say, that it's bad.
It starts with the win.
We need to get over the hump. We almost did in Columbia, South Carolina a year ago. We let one slip away. There was some bad coaching late in that game. He's talked about some things he might do a little bit differently, some mistakes that were made by his team also. And again, I like Clark Lee. I like almost everything that he said. I think if you're going to say something like that, you also need to acknowledge the losing streak and how big it's going to be to win a game.
Otherwise, you sound like a crazy man.
Yeah.
And he sounded like a crazy man.
A little bit. And
he would say that the media bowed down and got on their knees for James Franklin here in town every time he said something that was brash or demanding that he's the top team in the SEC East. So,
but he also had a couple wins in relative short order, didn't he, James Franklin?
No, he was here and he went back-to-back years for 9 wins. Took the job over and demanded that people follow his team because Vanderbilt was not going to be the Vanderbilt of the year prior, and they went out there and won. Then he left. He bolted as soon as things got good.
Yeah, I think it's two very different things. James Franklin won and then talked about needing more support because they're trying to change the mindset of Vandy and they want to be a different Vandy. Derek Mason, I remember, got crushed in year one because he went out there and said, our goal is to win the SEC this year. And people were questioning him, and he went out and lost by 30 to Temple in the first game of the season. And there was a steep drop-off from James Franklin.
Well, let's add on some layers there. He got crushed because he said he was going to take the same recruiting mindset that he had at Stanford, which was this national recruiting base, which is the exact opposite of what James Franklin was going to do. He said he was going to recruit defense, and they're going to be a run-first mentality, and it was the opposite of what we were seeing from a James Franklin-led team. And in that respect, he's also saying he's going to win the SEC East, and then you're exactly right about Temple. He deserved to be fired after that game.
I don't, going back to the Clark Lee thing, I don't put a lot of stock into big statements made by someone at SEC Media Days, regardless of if it's good or bad. I just thought that I'm fine with him saying that, but then when you dodge the question about the SEC losing streak that is hanging over the heads of everyone at Vanderbilt now.
I asked him directly about that on the show.
Yeah, then that to me, you got to answer both. Okay, how are you going to go about doing that? Okay, we have a plan. Well, we don't talk about you got to get over the losing streak before you're the best program in the country. That's step one. That's the only thing I had an issue with. But again, I like him. I think he's got a plan. I know he's got a plan. Whether it works or not remains to be seen. On to the Tennessee part of this.
Well, real quick, on the Vanderbilt front, if he doesn't say that, no one's talking Vanderbilt this week. No one's talking Vanderbilt last week. So in a way, it is a win because he is item 3 or 4 on a list of newsworthy moments from last week where no one is talking Vanderbilt Commodore athletics nationally, locally, regionally. They're not moving the needle. And to be a part of the conversation in a very deliberate state of the Vanderbilt Commodore address, where he said the most words of any coach that got up there, he mentions here's our goal. Here's where we're going to end up.
That's fair.
That is fair.
I think he gets that if he says what he said, but at the same time acknowledges we got to start with an SEC win. Do both. You and I talked about the 30,000-foot view and a ground level view, and he could say the 30,000-foot view and still get the headlines for that, and nobody would have
he said over
messed with the ground level
2,100
view.
words in his opening statement, and I watched every one of them live, and he didn't shy away from the losing. In fact, he viewed last year, he put it as very necessary. An hour and a half later, he came on the show live with us, and I asked him the same thing. Why was last year necessary based on where you view yourself right now? And in no uncertain terms, he's pointing at what he inherited and what Derek Mason left as to where they are and what they have to go through. And I think looking forward, he's got to start playing the freshmen.
Yeah, you said that.
He's got to start playing the freshmen, and he knows that there may be light at the end of the tunnel, but you can't tell whether or not it's a train or the sun is rising or setting at the end of the track.
But I think
they've
it's somewhat
recruited well
naive.
under him. For Vanderbilt standards, they've recruited very well.
That's why I think you got to play those guys.
They're top 30 nationally. They're top 25 right now.
I don't want to lose. I wouldn't want to lose them to the portal by not playing them.
But also, you've got to acknowledge to your guys, they know how long it's been since that program's won a game. I don't know how you achieve the long range dominance that he's talking about without acknowledging the current badness.
Well, the current badness will have nothing to do with his team 2 years from now.
Right.
Because he'll have his guys in.
But he's talking today.
Yeah,
he's not talking about being the best team in the nation.
No,
today.
I know, but he's speaking in the.
He's
present.
doing his best to go beat Hawaii today.
Yeah. All right.
Circle that game. That's one that I'm looking early schedule on the season. I'm thinking,
Chad,
big test in that's a week before everyone else plays. That's that week 0 that's now called week 1 in college football. Northwestern plays Nebraska and Ireland that Saturday, for example.
Peak.
Late at night, it's like a 9 or 10 o'clock start in Hawaii. That's a big game because people say it's Hawaii, and I understand that, and this is an SEC team. They should have lost to UConn at home a year ago. They got housed by ETSU, who's not even FBS a year ago. They snuck out a win against Colorado State. The two teams they beat were two of the worst in college football a year ago. You may laugh, but that's a big step if they go to Hawaii and win that game. That's a big step in the right direction and positive momentum for their season.
Well, also, and I asked Clark Lee about this. He's got the trip to Hawaii. They are going to Northern Illinois. If there is another statement about how you view yourself and the reflection in the mirror, it's the SEC going on the road to play in the group of 5, period. Just pick out a team. If the SEC's on the road, that tells you where they are in the hierarchy of how they view themselves and what they're trying to accomplish. And by doing the home and home or the 2 games in Nashville, 1 on the road, you're not paying your opponent as much to come on the road and play you because you're playing in their backyard against the defending MAC champs. So, they're going to treat that as a bowl game too, and that's putting them in no great situation.
Those are not the teams they should be playing.
Well, they can
They've
play
lost
those teams.
to a lot worse teams than those.
They can play those teams, but play them at home.
I mean, Paul, you're going to run out of teams to play.
Oh.
Like if you're not handling UConn and Colorado State or Northern Illinois, I mean, you can only play one FCS team, and they lost to that FCS team.
But, Chad, an SEC program on the road at Northern Iowa or Northern Illinois, that tells you the hierarchy a bit.
Yeah, Maryland's at Charlotte. We had Will Healy on, a couple weeks ago, and that's another one. That shows you where Maryland is financially.
Right.
The fact they're going to a mid-major on the road to play says a lot. Look, I like what Clark Lee has said so far. I didn't love that statement. I didn't love that he wouldn't even talk about the losing streak. But that Hawaii game is one to circle for the future of that program.
One big takeaway that deserves a ton of attention is the way Brian Harsin went at the issues of the offseason at Auburn.
Didn't hide.
Did not hide from it. The players spent a ton of time on Radio Row, as did Harsin, making the rounds. We had Trey Wallace on to begin the show. This was Thursday. And I said, Harsin addressing things head on was interesting. I still believe this is his last year there, but he's pointing to, the inquiry being tough and how it brought his team together. I spoke with one of his players and asked, I said, is this actually true? That you actually believe that the team is closer now because of the inquiry of the offseason? He said, absolutely. And I compare Ole Miss and Auburn in the same boat as my expectation level. And here's how I compare. I want to look at Ole Miss and say, this is a team that takes a big step back this year based on where they were last year. And I look at Auburn and say, there's no way this team lives up to any type of win total that fans may be wanting. But then you look at their schedule. Ole Miss's start to the season, they will be among the most talked about teams in the conference because they're going to be unbeaten. They're going to be 6-0 before you can bat an eye. And Auburn opens up at home against Mercer and then San Jose State. They will then take on Penn State, a game that went down to the wire a year ago, and now it'll be at Jordan-Hare.
Yep, it'll be at Auburn.
If they get to 3-0, they're hosting Missouri, and then they host LSU. So, and if you start looking around at what LSU and Missouri are doing, keep in mind what Auburn did against them and what they did against certain teams. That Auburn beat Ole Miss a year ago.
Still going to be hollow, though.
There are examples of why you can point to Auburn and think, man, by mid-October, we could be looking at this team as, man, this is a lot better group than what we expected, even though they haven't even hit the heart of the schedule yet.
Where does it go from there? You have it in front of you? I'm going to get it.
Well, they're going to play Alabama late. They're going to play Georgia in the middle of the season.
It's going to be a remarkable coaching job if they, even with that schedule, they get off to a great start.
They start 5-0. If they start 5-0, it's because their first 5 games are at home.
Yeah, Georgia's next. Georgia, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Auburn after that.
No, they don't,
Western Kentucky, Bama.
This is where the continuity issue, if it is going to be one, plays a factor out of the home. If they start fast, they're on to something. If not, Harsin's out before Thanksgiving rolls around.
I think he's going to be out because I don't fully believe in their quarterback. I think we witnessed Zach Calzada's one shining moment against Alabama last year.
Either him or TJ Finley.
Yeah, I just don't think that he's got the quarterback he needs to go on a great run this year. And you can only coach so well and coach up a quarterback situation that is not great in the SEC and win. So I just don't see it. I love how he handled himself. I love how he went right at all the issues at SEC Media Days. And you mentioned Tennessee also.
Hold on, one second on Auburn. They could go 5-0 legitimately. I would think they'd slip once. But they could then go 5-5.
Sure. But starting 5-0 and getting the fan base behind you again is a massive victory for Brian Harsin. I mean, Jordan-Hare is one of the best environments in college football. And if you get Auburn starting on an unbeaten streak after the offseason they've had,
I think it'd be tremendous.
And you get that team playing for that coach.
But if you go 5-0 and then it turns into 5-5, I think people be bailing out it.
Well, maybe, but we were saying that last year, and they led Alabama 10-0 with 5 minutes to play in the game.
You know who needs to bail out is Brian Harsin if they get off to a 5-0 start.
Right.
I would have my agent on the horn with everyone saying, hey, this guy faced all this offseason, and he is 5-0 with this group. Who wants him?
Yep.
Because
you're exactly
there is no loyalty there. We know that across sports, but there's no loyalty with the people and the money people that matter at Auburn. It's clear. Harsin knows that. I think it's irreparable. Harsin could win, and the fans will be kissing his feet because he's winning, and they'll go back on everything they did, and those big power boosters will go back on everything they did if they're winning. Not going to matter, I think, ever for Brian Harsin. I think he came into that media days defiant. I think he's going to be defiant with those boosters. I think he's going to be defiant with the fans. So I think if he wins, he'd be wise to look for an out.
Well, that agent
at
better
Auburn.
be active the first week of October before they get to Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas,
Well,
Mississippi State,
the
Texas
agent
A&M.
was active this past off season. I mean,
I'm sure.
They were talking to Oregon this past off season. Coming up, we'll get into Tennessee, some takeaways there, and maybe we may need to make a show bet, gentlemen.
Ooh, I like it. It's been a while.
I see the line, the early line between Vanderbilt and Hawaii, and we may need to, create a new 401k.
Going now. Going now.
Details on that
but
coming
time
up.
to bet your college fund.
OutKick 360 rolls on. OutKick 360 rolls on. I'm not sure how much the line will move between now and August 27th, honestly. But Vanderbilt is currently favored by 6.5 at Hawaii in week 0 of the college football season.
And we just all made bets.
I mean, yeah, if you're looking to make some money, I think it's a favorable bet to go with the home team getting points in an opening game where there is no preseason.
With huge travel.
I don't know a thing about Hawaii football this year.
But you know
But
enough.
they are banking on Vanderbilt to be a very different team this year. If they are a 6.5-point favorite on the road against anyone. And I'm talking a lot of FCS teams that they would not have been a 6.5-point favorite against a year ago.
That's a crazy spread. But here's
We'll
the
see.
one
Again,
thing.
I
When
know
you see a
nothing-
crazy spread, oftentimes that means go on the side of the crazy
Vandy
spread.
by 7.
Hawaii could be Colorado State or UConn of a year ago. I don't know. I say all this to say I know nothing about Hawaii. I know that to put Vanderbilt as a close to touchdown favorite on the road against anyone, that is Vegas expecting Vandy to be very different from the 2021 version of Vandy.
What is Hawaii going to do when they knock down that stadium and build what looks to be a nice new stadium? They're going to play in a high school field there?
Are they knocking it down or just renovating?
No, they're knocking it down. They're knocking it down and making a nice new complex. It's kind of a horseshoe field, but not the traditional horseshoe. They're making it like a 3/4 field, and then one sideline will be reduced and not have much to it. Looks very nice, and they deserve to have that. Maybe it gets them back in the Pro Bowl thing, but at least they'll have like a legitimate football stadium in Hawaii for the university and whatever else they can draw out there. But I wonder what they're going to do for the year or two. I would imagine it would take 2 years to get the new one up at the same venue.
The article I read last week, I just pulled up my history. The headline from Honolulu is proposed seating expansion and other upgrades to the University of Hawaii's Clarence TC Athletics Complex, once slated for the summer of 2022, has been pushed back at least a year. So they look at it, the way that phrases that is upgrades to their campus facility.
I saw something different that looked to be new.
Well,
now maybe they were building it, like across from it and then doing away with it, and it made it like a beautiful circular campus for the stadium. It's really a dump. I don't think it's worth saving.
I see in the story the 9,000 seat facility, go back up, Hutton, will remain intact starting with the opener against Vanderbilt on August 27th.
So that's for now.
9,000?
This was long range. Yeah, it's pretty small.
Pretty small? I know high schools around here that might be more than 9,000. That is tiny.
I mean, I think 9,000 they have at the Star in the Dallas Cowboys
more
practice
than that.
facility.
I think it's like
12.
12 to 15,000.
I remember Mount Juliet High School when I was there hosted a game that had 7,000 in attendance in a state semifinal. That was a lot of standing room around the stadium, but 9,000 is pretty tiny.
Well, this ties into a discussion I was having last week with the powers at B for Middle Tennessee State. I was at an event there.
Yeah, how'd that go?
It was great. They're leaning into NIL as well at their own level. But the one thing that I'm excited about is, so I was in high school whenever they ushered their program into Division I. At the time, as a part of, just to be considered to meet regulations, your stadium had to seat a capacity of at least 30,000. So they built this stadium that's too large for what they need.
Yep.
And they are now coming through with big-time renovations that will reduce capacity a significant amount. And think Arkansas complex, where they're going to have the football complex that will be at one end of the end zone, and you can overlook what's going on inside the stadium.
This is a trend. It's brilliant by them. That Texas Tech renovation that's going to connect is brilliant by them.
West Virginia
shrinking the size of these enormous stadiums is a smart business move.
And
upping the price of the ticket and making it more premium.
Luxury.
That Tennessee announcement that it's still going to seat 100,000 is completely bogus.
Yeah,
there is no way you take out the complete upper deck of one end zone, put up a jumbotron and make it a party deck,
and have the same.
It looks
size
great,
or bigger.
But go from 104 to 100. That's some real mathematical wrangling that's going on to count for standing room only and sideline people to get to 100,000.
Final minute, Chad, then we've got Riddle coming up, but your thoughts on what you saw from Tennessee, and we can hit back on this in hour number 3.
Very impressed with Hendon Hooker. Just overall. I know he was up in New York with Spire Sports the week before, but a very well-rounded guy. Interesting.
Day or two before.
Yeah. I watched the interview you guys had with him. I was very impressed with him. There was a presence about Tennessee that's been lacking in recent years. It felt like a marquee team rolling through when Tennessee. And I like the joke from Josh Heupel about the golf ball. He was asked, hey, Lane Kiffin's been signing golf balls and mustard bottles. And he joked and said, yeah, I wish I had a golf ball that night also against Ole Miss. I'm kidding. I thought he played it perfectly.
That was awesome, though, that Kiffin came through and fans were waiting on him with
mustard bottles
to autograph last week.
That is never going to go away for both Kiffin and for Tennessee. That will stay for a long time.
Kiffin made sure that the cameras were rolling before he went there and signed it, then turned and posed.
Oh, of course.
It. And it was classic. Coming up, SummerSlam for the WWE will be in Nashville this Saturday night at Nissan Stadium. WWE superstar Riddle joins OutKick 360 next on the OutKick Network. Hang with us. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. WWE Summerslam streaming this Saturday live on Peacock and from right here in OutKick's backyard, Nissan Stadium in Nashville. We've got Brock Lesnar facing Roman Reigns for the undisputed Universal WWE Championship in the last man standing match. Pat McAfee, friend of the show, takes on Happy Corbin. Liv Morgan against Ronda Rousey for the women's title. The Miz is with Logan Paul, and there's many more, including our next guest, the original bro, Riddle, facing Seth Rollins this Saturday. What's up, bro? How are you, man?
What's up, dude? Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be on.
Nashville is excited for Saturday night. This is the first major event at Nissan Stadium involving the WWE. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited. The fans, the WWE Universe is pretty excited. I think Nashville should get ready because people don't understand, like, these events for WWE, they're like mini Super Bowls, except for WrestleMania. That's like the Super Bowl. But SummerSlam, Nashville's going to be overrun by the WWE Universe, and it's going to be insane. I can't wait. It's always a good time at the show, after the show, before the show. So I'm just stoked to, it's SummerSlam season, bro.
Man, I've followed you for a while. You fought in the UFC. You're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, I'm only a two-stripe brown belt. I'll be getting the black belt soon. I've been teaching and training, but I took a little break after the UFC.
Okay.
So,
well, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at here, if we're being honest.
I've beaten many black belts in the UFC and at the UFC. People have said I'm a black belt, but yeah, I didn't want any false information. I'm just as good.
Yeah, the taboo if you claim to be a black belt and you're not in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I get it, man.
It's a thing. They don't like it. So,
So from the independent route after your MMA career, you're working in landscaping, you're doing some roofing. You know the struggle, and now you're main eventing Raw and SmackDown, and you're over. I mean, you have to, sit back and be like, man, I need to enjoy this because I've reached the level that you've been trying to obtain.
Yes, and I will say I'm enjoying it, and I'm enjoying it thoroughly. One thing Triple H said is, hey, guys, I know there's a lot going on. You're traveling, you're busy, this, that, life. Try to take it in. Try to enjoy every moment because it's not going to last forever. And he's right. It's not. And I've known that even since the UFC days. This doesn't last forever. Your career's like on a stopwatch. It clicks go, and eventually it clicks stop, and it's over. It's done. You're finite, Yeah. So definitely enjoying every second of it. I'm taking advantage of every opportunity I get. There's not a bad day at work for me. I don't care if I'm getting beat up or if I'm beating somebody up, because right now I'm loving life. I'm enjoying myself. I get to be a character on TV. I get to fight 3-4 times a week and travel the world every week, basically. I don't have any breaks. And I will say this, I'm very popular, but I wouldn't say over. I mean, some people would say over, but Randy said, because we came back from the crowd, they love us, they're going crazy. And I'm like, dude, we're over. And Randy goes, we're not over. I'm like, what? What do you mean? And he's like, they like us, but we're not over. He goes, Hulk Hogan was over.
Oh, okay.
Over. And John Cena's over. He goes, we're good. We're not over yet. And I was like, wow. But that's just like how humble a guy Randy is, and he had to humble me right there,
Well, I mean, there's a great example of the abrupt bummer of an injury, right? You're teaming with Randy Orton. You guys, the crowd's liking you. You're saying you're not over, but I mean, you're very popular in the WWE. And then he suffers the shoulder injury, a legitimate injury that has him out for a while. And now you're back working singles matches like this Saturday against Rollins. That sucks because I know that you feel like you're working towards a plan. And while you may not know the end goal, you know the results in the moment, and then the abrupt change, and you're off on a different course.
Yeah, I'm always this kind of guy. I seem pretty optimistic, and I am. But at the same time, I always play worst case scenarios. And every time I go out there, I play the scenario of me either getting hurt or my partner or whatever happening. Because say even if Seth got hurt now, I wouldn't have an opponent at SummerSlam, right? And certain things change. And the thing is, especially in professional wrestling, it's really right place, right time, consistency, and durability. You know, if you it's a rough job if you're not adequate or built for it, you know. But yeah, you know, and these things happen, and I definitely miss Randy. Love that guy. He's great. But I know he'll be back, and I'm gonna do my thing. You know, even when we first started teaming up, he was out for a little bit at the beginning for a couple months, you know, and kept RK Bro going. This time, I think it's going to be a little longer, but I think when he comes back, people will be very excited.
I don't think it's any secret. It took a while for guys to warm up to you a bit, right? You feel like you've turned the corner. Randy's probably a good example of that.
Yeah, Randy definitely didn't like me when he first met me. Most people, I say it's a 50-50 split. When you first meet me, you're either gonna be like, oh, that guy's pretty cool. Like Pat McAfee, we met. Second we met, we were bros. You know, he's a bro, I'm a bro, we're stallion. The guy can do, we get it, right? But the other people, like the tribal chief, not so much. Rob, not so much. Seth, not so much. You know, these are certain people that really don't and didn't like me. And I don't know if they like me as a person, but I think after working with me and being in the ring with me and seeing what I'm about, they all respect me for sure. And they all appreciate me, and they all know I'm definitely there. You know, I'm not one of those guys that dials it in. I'm going to bring it. I'm going to make people care. And that's what I do. And I think that's what we all do at a certain level, you know? We got to make people care about what we do, and I do that well. So
Seth recently said that he's looking forward to seeing something original with you now that Orton is injured. But I mean, I'm reading that and I thought this guy is very original. I mean, Riddle is legitimately your last name, for instance. Like that, there are things about the gimmick that are not gimmicky with you, based on you're playing yourself and cranking it up to 11.
Yeah, you know, like I mean, I fought in the UFC. You know, I'm pretty good. I didn't go out losing. You know, yeah, man. I mean, I think I bring a lot to the table. I think my past brings a lot to the table. You know, I think it all plays little things into my character and my story, kind of like Randy. And, you know, I think a lot of times, you know, you got those John Cena's, somebody who's just so perfect, but sometimes it's nice and refreshing to see somebody have success that's not perfect, you know? And I don't think I'm perfect. I think I'm good. I think I'm all right. But I think for humanity, you know, I think it's nice to see just like not somebody that's flawless making it, you know? Because, you know, I've had like get fired from the UFC and stuff like that, and having Dana White talk all that trash about me. And then now it's like, dude, you're on SummerSlam, you're main eventing all these like TV shows, and you're on this and that. You're on the Jimmy Fallon show the other day. Like, and my schedule's crazy. I'm flying everywhere. I've been to the Crown Jewel in Saudi like a bunch of times. Like, it's crazy, you know? And I like think about it. I was just some guy that got fired like a bunch of years ago because something, you know, whatever. I don't even want to get into it. It doesn't matter anymore. So yeah, it's awesome. I think
Riddle from the WWE with us. He takes on Seth Rollins this Saturday at SummerSlam. Hey, on the way out, everyone that's familiar with WWE knows you work barefoot. I mean, there's no secret there. You flip off your shoes in a way where I would describe it as you're doing almost a toe touch and a jump, and the flip-flops fly. Has anyone caught friendly fire when you do that?
So one time, this was back when I was still in NXT, you know? And we were doing a house show, so the guardrails are a little closer to the ring.
Okay.
And I kicked off the flops, and usually they go over the top rope and float down. Well, for some reason, the left foot it flew off sooner. and it kind of darted out the bottom rope and the middle rope in between there. And there was an elderly woman sitting in the front row, and it cracked her right in the face and broke her glasses. And I felt so bad because she couldn't see the match, and I broke her glasses. And I usually security, they take my flip-flops from the fans. That day they let.
Oh, you get them back.
Yeah, I get them, well, because they're hard to come by, those flops. You know? This ain't a John Cena sweatband. You know? Premium flops, bro. You can get them on WWE Shop. But the flop cracked this elderly lady, broke her glasses, and she was a good sport about it. But I let her keep the flip flops. I was like, "Do you want to keep them? I'm so sorry." And you know, she kept them. I brought the action to the outside. Gave the guy some hits in front of her. You know, get her into the action. You know, I felt bad. But yeah, that's probably like the worst one I've seen in person. And then one time I was in England at Wembley Arena, and I kicked my flops off, and I went to the back, and they weren't there. And I was like, "Security, did you guys get my flip-flops?" They're like, "Oh no, you kicked them too far." And I'm like, "Those are my only flip-flops." And it's like downpouring rain in London, England, and I have no shoes, nothing. And then I send out a tweet being like, "Hey, please, did you have my flip-flops? Give them to security. I don't have any other shoes." And luckily, Twitter helped, security helped. They made an announcement too, but they didn't make an announcement until later. Kind of sucked. But I eventually got both my flip-flops back.
You can see Riddle this Saturday, SummerSlam, right here in Nashville and streaming live on Peacock. Hey, man, good to catch up with you. Good to have you back in Nashville and WWE bringing SummerSlam to Nissan Stadium. Can't wait for this, and we'll catch up soon.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It was a pleasure. And thanks for listening to my stories. I appreciate it.
We'll get you on again soon, man. There's Riddle and more coming after our SummerSlam discussion. More with OutKick 360 next across the OutKick network. Glad you're with us as we broadcast live from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Our thanks to Riddle for joining us. That we had that conversation last week, 24 hours prior to the Vince McMahon news that he was retiring, and then all of the craziness from the weekend. But this weekend, WWE hits Nashville. Our thanks to Riddle for the time, and we hope to catch up with more guests this coming week. Also this week, NFL training camps getting underway. A lot of pressers will take place between now and Wednesday morning as coaches will set the agenda and answer all of the off-season storylines going into the first practice of the 2022 NFL slate. And there has been a lot of movement. It has been an NFL offseason of change from players and coaches either on new teams, being via trades, or all of the litigation that has been going on in courtrooms instead of on the field itself. Now we get to back to the ball aspect of the NFL, and there are plenty of things to keep an eye on as all of the teams will be underway by the middle portion of this week.
I think, as much as Chad said earlier, the elements of practice that matter less and less. There are some very intriguing storylines going on. For me, and it's one that we've talked about a lot this offseason that set itself up kind of over the course of the offseason. The one that I'm most interested in pertains to three quarterbacks that are in prove-it seasons. Tua Tagovailoa, Zach Wilson, Jalen Hurts. They've had things set up around them. They've had additions made to their offensive lines, to their receiving cores. They've got two of them have coaches that are new to relatively new. And this is it for them in terms of proving that they can be the guy to lead their teams forward, or their teams are probably going to have to start to look elsewhere. Philadelphia and Miami are set up to go get replacements. Zach Wilson's on a team that's constantly churning. Are these guys legit or not? I suspect the answer on all three may be no. But they've set up, as is always the case, Hut. They've done a wonderful job setting up hope. And this is legitimate hope. There are legitimate weapons. I mean, you're talking about getting A.J. Brown in Philadelphia, who's a big-time guy. You're talking about getting Tyreek Hill, who is a friggin' magical player. And in Zach Wilson's case, you're talking about one of the best drafts we've seen out of the Jets in a long time, where they really got some great-looking young players. These are three legitimate off seasons for three legitimate teams. Now let's see what the quarterbacks can do.
See, I'll add on to that quarterback list you just had. I'm most interested in watching the second-year guys. Zach Wilson, you had on yours as one of them. But go down the list. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance. I mean, is Trey Lance due for a breakout year, even though there's been a lot of skepticism around him with that offense, with that coaching? Davis Mills, who by the end of the year, statistically, you look at QBR, finish. Was better than all the guys that were rookies with the Texans. Mac Jones, is he overrated for what he did in year one with that great defense for New England when they were having success? I think a 7-game win streak at one point for Mac Jones. I'm very interested to see what we think of those guys now. We know what we think of them now. What are we saying about those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys after year two? And how are we ranking them? I'm fascinated to watch that unfold.
Well, the New England's on my list because of it's
a good one.
The secrecy that they're going about this, the new coaches. This is Mac Jones's team now. Make no mistake about it. Last year as a rookie, you're looking around and you're looking for ways that they're going to prop him up. Going into year two, now a year of a full season starting, and as early or as late as November of last year, he was on a team that many were comparing to the team that Brady was a part of for the first full season. So high expectations for Mac Jones with a coaching staff that a lot of people are raising an eyebrow to, despite Belichick putting it together. You look at the guys that they're having on offense, and their backgrounds are either on special teams or defense with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia splitting time coaching the offense in various ways. One guy's helping with the run game, the other guy's helping the pass game. Someone's got to call plays. And even though they're not naming a defensive coordinator, we know Belichick has a huge role in all of that, despite what it may say next to a coach's name on paper. Point being, massive year for Mac Jones with that coaching staff, and then Trevor Lawrence in year number 2, actually having a coach that we expect to make it through the season without, pulling the trigger on himself, so to speak, and bailing out via parachute. Despite the efforts of the ownership trying to have his back, we know how things ended with Urban Meyer. It should be a lot different with Doug Peterson. And if Trevor Lawrence is the second coming of Andrew Luck, the next surefire thing to Andrew Luck, where a year and a half in advance of the draft, we knew he was going to be the top pick as long as he was healthy. He needs to take his game up to a completely other level than what we've seen from year number 1, rookie Trevor Lawrence. So I'm watching both aspects there. Second biggest
One thing about the Patriots, it's going to be very result-driven, right? We're not going to get answers about who's coaching what or any of that. All that's going to remain shrouded in mystery. The answer about how effective it is going to come in the win and loss column.
Well, yeah.
Unlike most teams where we would gradually find out some stuff. We're not going to find out.
This is more than just win-loss column. This is about championships. This is New England.
Well, they're not going to win a championship this year, but maybe they get themselves back on course. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, they were on course last year. I mean, they had
on a better course.
They had a top 2 defense and a run game that could go out and win games, and then they got boat raced in the playoffs by Buffalo, and they played Buffalo 3 times, and twice Mac Jones is a non-factor.
Yep.
One was a run where they were just going to run it because of the wind, and then the playoff loss, Buffalo just was superior. And they were crushed in that playoff loss on the road.
I think even if things go well for them, they're not on pace with Buffalo by any means.
Well, this is about contending for the AFC and contending for that division. New England's not far off. Like if we did a straw poll of the media, it's not like many are predicting them a distant third to Buffalo. They're right there in the number 2 spot, and the question is Miami or New York going to potentially catch them and battle for number 2 instead of battling for number 3, which is what those 2 teams have been doing. If New England's going to get back up in that upper echelon where they're going to be contending against Buffalo, this is a critical year for them offensively, because defensively they are extremely consistent. They were a top 2 scoring defense in the NFL last year, second only to Buffalo. And we expect the players that were there that played a big role in that to return and like the Matthew Judons to have the same type of effect. They don't have J.C. Jackson anymore, but they've gone the path of what they traditionally do, which is let their big-time players go, and they replace them through their own way. They have not drafted nearly as well in recent years, especially the 2019 draft, which is the N'Keal Harry draft, and they just traded him away for practically nothing. They've gone the route of free agency, and they've gone the route, and that was last year, they've gone the route of a trade this year to help bolster the offensive talent. But I think in the overall big picture, this is a big year for them to do more than just win some games that keeps them in contention. This is about all the media that said, oh, give Belichick time to really determine if this is, if it's Brady or Belichick. Well, I mean, how much time are you going to give him with a quarterback that's proven he can be your down-in, down-out guy, and a defense that's really good, championship-level good, and a run game that's adequate enough to be consistently good on a weekly basis? At some point, you got to take another step forward. And their option, their choice was to go with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia as their offensive coaches. That deserves a clear analysis and study this year, and it starts through the first part of the preseason with what they're going to be doing, which is going to be bland. But I don't anticipate the second-year quarterbacks sitting out all of the preseason like we would see with some vets.
No, some of them need to play for sure.
You got to get some reps going.
I was super critical of the Patriots winning free agency last year, and Matthew Judon was excellent. But the 2 big offensive additions, Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, did not do a lot to me, does that second year
This is what I
of
said
those
Friday.
guys. Yeah, we talked about it last
I
week.
pointed this out. They have got to get the Pro Bowl status back up. Hunter Henry was hurt a couple different times last year.
Johnny Smith's a slow learner.
Johnny Smith, he's got to hit at the rate that they pay him.
He was a slow learner here. I know he's much more of an adult now, but let's chalk it up, say, to slow learning the new system. Second year should be much better, and they're not good at wide receiver, so they're going to be a too-tight team. Can Mac Jones be relying on those two tight ends? If not, they're really busted on that. Not with Judon, but maybe with those two tight ends who they paid a bleep load of money to.
Well,
that's going to be a big key.
It remains to be seen. They may have busted with their quarterback too if he's not able to do anything. And before we
Very
go,
intriguing team.
Before we go and bury the Patriots, I mean, they went to Buffalo a year ago. I know it was weird circumstances with that win game. They won. They were 6-2 on the road last season, and only a game back in that division. Now you look at the division: Bills 11-6, Patriots 10-7, Dolphins 9-8, all one game apart at the top. But crazier things have happened.
I'm not burying
I look
the
at both
Patriots.
rosters. Also, I'm talking to Paul. Paul's burying them. I'm saying you look at those rosters, and I'd be quick to say, well, yeah, the Bills should easily win that division.
That's a coaching thing.
I would have said that last year too.
It's a coaching thing.
And the Patriots almost had them and won in Buffalo in the regular season.
Yes.
Well, here's what I expect from Buffalo this year. And I know they're going to be 90% of people are going to pick the Bills to win the AFC, probably win the Super Bowl. It's going to be as heavy as it's been since Kansas City's prime. Kansas City's probably dipping with Tyreek Hill in terms of the picks.
Yeah.
Buffalo's going to be a very, very strong Super Bowl pick this year. I just think I don't think whatever Belichick's got up his sleeve, and I don't like what he's done with these coordinators and everything, is going to be enough to make up for the talent gap. And Buffalo's very talented.
I just think that you could still make the claim, even if it works out to whatever extent working out is for this. I still think you're just being overly cute.
Yes.
I think even if it
Unnecessarily
works
overly
out,
cute.
you could just say, okay, well, someone's calling the plays. You could have said it. I get that Bill Belichick has earned the right to do whatever the hell he wants at any time as a coach. But you're being unnecessarily cute at this point by going about it this way.
I think we'd all agree on that. But he's Belichick. Maybe it works.
The other storyline, which we're not going to see much of in the preseason, but it's worth following, is all four teams in the AFC West have massive storylines at the quarterback position, either based on offseason acquisition or the new player that's now running the show. Russell Wilson is not going to get many preseason game snaps. The same for Patrick Mahomes. Although Mahomes did demand that he wanted to play the final preseason game last year, he didn't play very long.
Justin Herbert either, probably, right?
Justin Herbert does not need to be playing in the preseason. And the same goes for Derek Carr and Devontae Adams in the preseason. But all of those quarterbacks either have brand new systems and coaches, and they're on a new team, or they are on a team that has been bolstered by the offseason acquisitions of players around them, and that counts the defenses, too, that have been bolstered. The Chargers are going to be extremely heralded as the most improved team from last year to this year, and rightfully so. Meanwhile, you've got Denver, who had a top 7 defense last year. They returned all 3 of their starters at wide receiver, and they've just traded for Russell Wilson, which many would say is a top 5 trade of NFL caliber history, if you just start ranking the biggest trades and the biggest names and the positions involved. That being said, Vegas gets Josh McDaniels away from New England, and they now have Devontae Adams as the number 1 option for Derek Carr, along with Hunter Renfrow. Waller's at tight end. Josh Jacobs feels slighted because they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so he's in a contract year, which I love. There are reasons to like Vegas, and there are reasons to point to Kansas City for consistency, but yet here is some interesting storyline given the fact that we did not see the best football played from Kansas City in their last chance out there. I mean, Cincinnati made them look very average.
And Tyreek Hill is a massive player.
And with Hill not there, what does that mean for the coverages for Kelsey and how they've replaced him through the draft and through free agency, replacing Hill, I'm saying. Which you can't replace him, but the players that they've brought in, can they run the same style and the same system, and can Bieniemy get the same type of results? Or does it need to be more intermediate type routes and more emphasis on the run game. Not a total switch on how they go about doing things, but it can't always be the magic show that it sometimes turns into, which is all fun and they have a ton of success. But at some point, you start looking at results in the division, and we think the division itself is caught up with Kansas City more than it is Kansas City backsliding. And then you also have some great teams and situations across the AFC where, while Kansas City's been in the AFC Championship game in recent memory, and they've played for the Super Bowl a couple of times in recent memory, this is an interesting mix and match considering you've got Bieniemy back, and it feels like for the final season in many ways, based on are they going to bring him back, are they not? And they finally decided to late in the offseason process. You've got the situation with Hill, but also just the way that Mahomes played in that final game against Cincy in the AFC Championship game was not good. It was among the worst games we've ever seen him play, and now he's in a division that's much tougher.
If those teams stay healthy, which is our caveat for everything, the 2 or 3 who get in the playoffs may only get one home playoff game. Because I can't imagine anybody's going 6-0, 5-1. Heck, 4-2 would be a good accomplishment in that division. You're beating each other up, and those are going to be some great divisional games. But I find it hard to believe that the AFC's best team record-wise, nobody's getting the buy out of that division, I wouldn't think. And I think it'd be hard to be number 2 in the AFC coming out of that division. Again, another thing that looks like advantage Bills or the Titans or the Colts, if one of them really take off. Or, if Baltimore rebounds big or Cincinnati has another good year, I think their divisions are they're more bottom feeders out of those things, much more so than in that division.
I can't help but feel a little bit robbed when there's one division every so often that seems to be so dominant. And you've got that this year. I like it when it's spread out a little bit more evenly across divisions with the top 2 teams or so in each division being really good. But that is a dominant division this year. I don't think there's any way around it. Crazy things can happen, but looking at it right now, it's going to be a fun one to watch.
I hate when I'm on board with the hype, but I find it hard to think the Bills aren't going to be really good. I was on the Chargers. Hutton and I both were last year, and they came up short. But I like what they've done in the offseason. It's hard for me not to like the Chargers this year. I'm trying to talk myself out of being too on board with those teams because I think everybody's going to be on board with both of those teams. But I'm going to like both those teams a lot going into this season.
And the storyline that may, we're going to discuss it a lot, but it may be overlooked a bit because we just haven't. You look at their roster and you think, well, they're Baltimore. They're going to be in position to compete in that AFC North. But Lamar Jackson, what's that?
They were just a mess last year. I mean, forget how beaten up they were. That's why they were so bad.
Oh, and they were 8-3. They were 8-3, and then they lost 6 straight games to finish the season.
They had
when
no
Lamar Jackson went out. Their running game was completely cut out. I feel like the COVID rules played a factor in one of those weeks for them. They're a team that I look at with Lamar Jackson back, and 2 of their running backs, I believe, started on PUP officially. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, I believe, are both on the physical and able to perform list to begin camp. They need a great start to get right back on track to where they were. But the storyline is going to be the Lamar Jackson contract and what happens with the negotiations or lack thereof, because it's really on him to spur that discussion.
And things line up so nicely for him. Look, you got Cleveland with the Deshaun Watson isn't going to be there for, we imagine, at least half a season. Pittsburgh is in rebuilding mode for the first time ever because the quarterback's not going to be good. And Cincinnati, I think, could be very good, but the defending champion of the conference that doesn't win the Super Bowl never does as well. So they'd have to break that long-standing streak to be back there. So, I mean, it's wide open for a great bounce back for Baltimore, who is always a good team. I mean, last year was the fluke. Baltimore's always right in the thick of it.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
And their schedule is very intriguing. And I realize you can. There are starts to a season that look tough, and they end up not being tough. But you can just look at this. So the first game of the year, it's Baltimore at the Jets. So you get Zach Wilson starting year number 2 with some offseason additions to what they've done against Baltimore in Lamar Jackson's first game back this year. They then host.
It's been a big offseason for Zach Wilson too.
And then
very eventful.
They then host Miami in the second game from Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa.
So 2 of those teams that are figuring things out.
They then go on the road against New England, another team that's likely figuring things out. They then host Buffalo, and then they host Cincinnati. So they get the Bills and the Bengals back to back.
I mean, it's
early.
It could be 3
and
2.
they're getting Cleveland late in their schedule when Watson could be back. So and they get Pittsburgh late in their schedule too. So it's a fascinating start based on the storylines that the Ravens will be facing with their own major storyline of getting Lamar Jackson back healthy.
I think a lot of people will be hot on the Ravens with the bounce back, and just because they're always good. I mean, Harbaugh is a great coach, and you don't see many dips. The Ravens are consistently good team.
They're also starting over on defense, new coordinator. Wink Martindale's not there.
Which was weird because last year's problems were not on Wink Martindale. I think that was a surprising firing.
So there's Baltimore. You brought up Cincy. Zach Taylor.
I like Cincinnati.
Zach Taylor said the biggest thing he's going to have to figure out on how to address with his team, and I admit I raised a bit of an eyebrow to it. It was like, what is it going to be like knowing we're not going to catch anyone by surprise? And I do think there was a sense of them doing that to some degree last year.
Yeah, nobody believes in the Bengals.
But you watch that team play, and how do you not believe in Chase and Burrow? But they were still putting up record-type numbers as a duo late in that season and going into the postseason run. So here's Cincy trying to run it back and get back to the AFC Championship game, get back to the Super Bowl run, knowing that they have the pieces in place to do so, knowing they did it last year without protecting their quarterback, and they have overhauled that offensive line properly.
That's the biggest thing.
And now they feel more secure in their QB play because he's not going to be under duress so much.
They did
However,
as well to address a problem there.
Taylor's like, look, guys, we're not going to catch anyone by surprise, and I've got to address that with the team and get them ready for that because we were doing the hunting last year, and that's just not going to be the case. We can't expect that we're going around the league and we're now the team that's bridging the schedule for a team that's facing a tough stretch, and they've got Cincinnati in the middle of it.
They've got to resolve things with Jesse Bates. I don't imagine a guy's holding out because of what it costs, but it's hanging over their heads.
I totally understand what Zach Taylor is saying with that because it's easy to sell, hey, let's go make history. We've not been anything here yet. Let's go prove everyone wrong. We got a chip on our shoulder. No one believes us. To transition to, we belong. We are the big boys. Come give us your best shot, and we're still gonna make it happen. But that's the step. When you've got the young franchise quarterback, you must transition to being that team and being comfortable in that role. Where suddenly Cincinnati is a draw because people want to see Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So when you come to town, not that you overlook teams NFL, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The national spotlight's going to be on you more. People are going to care about what you're doing. It's not going to be some plucky upstart fun story for everyone. You're going to be a team that people start to hate. And you got to get to that level if you're going to hang around for a while.
I'm not dismissing a healthy Cincinnati with Joe Burrow at quarterback, but I'm sure they were having the exact same conversation about Dan Marino the year after they went to the Super Bowl early with him.
Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs.
Never again.
I mean, go down there. There's guys currently in the league that you had to have that conversation. Went from surprising people with how good we were to now you're the hunted. Now you're a team that everyone across the league is circling that game because you're the Bills.
We haven't mentioned.
Are a good example now
we
too,
haven't
with
mentioned
Josh Allen.
One uninteresting team here. It's a really interesting season, I think. Lots of good storylines.
The other storyline that is being really underplayed is Aaron Rodgers going for a three-peat at MVP. MV3-peat is what they're calling it. And if so, I would not count it out. because of if they get results with the offensive talent they have around him right now, he's going to be
doing
among
a
their
better job there.
Yes, but think about the storyline there of a three straight MVP caliber seasons on what could be the final year of him. Period. I mean,
It's
his
Christian
career.
Watkins and Christian Watson and Sammy Watkins.
Yes,
It's not the best group of receivers he's had, and he's never had great receivers.
It'd also be crazy if he does have the three-peat and they don't win one Super Bowl in that three-peat.
Yeah,
if that happens too.
Well, here's a name for you on that team, Rich Bisaccia, because their special teams have sucked, and he's making $2 million a year for their special teams not to suck.
Well, they lost that game to San Francisco
Largely.
in the divisional round because of the special teams.
What a gig.
In the snow.
What a gig. $2 million a year to coach special teams somewhere.
What was he making in Vegas last year?
I don't know, but I would bet not $2 million.
That is good work if you can get it. Become such a special teams guru, you make $2 million a year.
Well, he missed
Not
out
bad.
though. He missed out. It's not bad. It sucks though for him because he'd be making 4+ as a head coach,
Yes.
or should be.
And he
They
did
should.
a hell of a job.
What was John Gruden making?
10.
He took over for, yeah. Not that he's going to make John Gruden money if he gets the job.
Well, he should
was
be
doing-
making Vrabel money of last year, which is $4 million.
He was doing John Gruden's job, is my point, and didn't get a chance to do it full time and make more money.
Hit us up with your thoughts and storylines of emphasis as we begin training camp. We're trust us, we're just getting started on the NFL discussion this week. There are plenty of storylines. Paul said there's not an uninteresting team that we've talked about. You could say that throughout division by division, which we'll be previewing throughout the week. There are only maybe we could count on one hand the amount of teams, the number of teams that are not interesting whatsoever in the league as we start this season. And we'll probably add 3 or 4 more by the end of September. But in large part, based on the fact that we have 7 teams per conference that get into the playoffs now, every team's relevant in the first
on
of
opening
December.
day.
Can I give you one team that I think is completely irrelevant
Every
to start?
team should
Irrelevant?
I don't care about it all.
Every
When
team,
we come back.
every team should be relatively
I've got one, too.
interesting by December, other than the 5 teams or so that I think we can list off that won't be. And I think they've admitted it based on their off seasons. We'll get that coming up, plus full previews throughout the week and what to watch for tonight leading in tomorrow's show. That's next on OutKick 360. Glad you're with us. Monday edition here on OutKick 360. Hutton, Withrow, and Koharski with you. 6th and Peabody, our location, with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. More NFL discussion coming up tomorrow. Plenty there. Plus, we'll hit the other headlines. Plenty of baseball tonight. Everyone back from the All-Star break, which is very short-lived. And now we get to see Yankees and Mets a little bit later.
Tough. You don't want to lose the Subway Series.
Braves are playing who now after the Angels?
Philly.
Oh,
start with Philly. I am interested to see what goes down this trading deadline for Major League Baseball because I think there's going to be some huge moves. Paul, you pumped up about the chance of Soto being a Yankee?
I'll take whoever we can get, but we need some middle relief more than anything right now. And Joey Gallo's got to be cut. They've got to replace him. I'm
out to dinner in Nebraska on Friday night, looked down on my phone, just checking the Braves score, and I see they got to Ohtani late. It was scoreless in the 7th. They ended up winning 7-0 or 7-1. Then I look at the score right below it, and I see at the time 27-5 Blue Jays over the Red Sox, and went on to be 28-5. Those
inside
three
the park
games,
grand slam too.
Red Sox suck right now.
I don't know the exact run differential, but the run differential of the 3 games for the Red Sox in this series, the worst run differential since 1899. The Cleveland Spiders. The Spiders of Cleveland. Tyler, our resident Cleveland fan, I'm sure knows all the great history of that Cleveland Spiders organization. That's the last time it's been that bad.
Our thoughts are with the family of Mark Howard, who passed away this weekend at the age of 65, longtime host here in Nashville, and a longtime journalist for News Channel 5 for sports, and went on to do some great things in the morning drive with the Wake Up Zone here in town. We worked with Mark for over a decade, and certainly worked with him for longer than that in various roles and positions, and we're sad with the news this weekend that he had passed away at the age of 65.
Really instrumental in giving me my start in radio. I started making regular appearances with the Wake Up Zone, and then more and more regular. I was on 3 hours a week with them, three different mornings a week. Somebody kindly sent me a picture way back at the old studio when we were all just getting started, laughing hysterically with Mark. Sad, really sad. Only 65. Has a son, 2 sons, and leaves them behind. We're told public memorial service coming in Nashville in a month or 6 weeks, and we hope to be able to be at that, and I know a lot of you want to be there. He's a big part of a lot of lives in Nashville. Did a lot for me, did a lot for Nashville.
Yeah, he was a sports encyclopedia. Mark probably would have known that Cleveland Spiders stat that I just threw out about the Red Sox this past weekend.
If not, it was on page 13.
Yeah, he was a hard worker when it came to his job. Always very nice. Always remember getting a Father's Day text from Mark Howard for the group for any father in the group, which said a lot about him. Great dad, and will definitely be missed by certainly his family, but everyone in the sports community.
The guy told a guy who was a Pro Bowl tight end that he could walk him into the ground.
He did.
Then pulled the muscle while he failed to walk him into the ground.
He did not walk him into the ground.
Classic Nashville rating.
Lapped. Coming up tomorrow, we'll get into the irrelevant teams. There's not many of them across the NFL, and we'll continue to preview training camps, which are getting going across the NFL on OutKick 360.
Box. Don't block the box. Lock your locks.